Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan, and this paper is called No Complete Problem for Constant Cost Randomized Communication. And this is joint work with Yuting Feng and Puya Hatami at Ohio State University and Liana Hembardzumian at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And the main result of this paper is just what we've put in the title, that there's no complete problem for constant cost randomized communication. So let's see what that means. And let's begin with one of the most extreme examples of the power of randomness in computation. So here we have two parties, Alice and Bob, and they each have some input file, or in this picture, I've drawn some book here. So Alice has this book or this file, Bob has this book or this file, and they want to know if they've got the same input. They want to know if their files are the same. And this is called the equality problem in communication complexity, and it's the textbook example of the power of randomness in communication. Because deterministically, Alice can do no better than just sending the entire file over to Bob, right? So if the input is n bits, then the amount of communication required is n. But we may have all seen a much more practical solution to this problem, where instead of sending this whole file, instead of sending all n bits, Alice computes a hash of her file and sends the hash code to Bob. And so if Alice and Bob indeed had the same file, they would see the same hash code. But if they had different files, then they would see that they have different hash codes, at least with high probability. And the way that we model this theoretically is that we say, Alice and Bob have access to this shared source of randomness. So they both see the same source of randomness, and they can use this randomness to generate a random hash function. And then Alice uses that random hash function to hash her input and send the hash code to Bob. Okay, and so let's take a moment to appreciate two interesting features of this problem. The first is that it's a total problem. So, there's no gap. It's not like we are trying to decide whether these inputs are equal or far from equal or something like that. We really want to exactly distinguish between equal or not equal, okay? And the second important feature is that the number of bits of communication required by this randomized protocol depends on the probability of success that we would like to achieve. So better probability of success requires more bits of communication, but it does not depend on the size of the input. So no matter how big these files are that Alice and Bob have, the amount of communication that they need to check whether their inputs are the same does not change, okay? So no matter how big the input gets, the amount of communication always stays the same. And so our goal is to try and understand which communication problems have this extreme behavior, which communication problems can be solved with a number of bits of communication that does not depend on the input size. So in other words, we want to understand which communication problems have constant cost randomized communication. And so you can think in general, our goal is to understand, the power of randomness in communication. And what we want to do is really understand these most extreme examples. And there's a lot of reasons why it's interesting to study constant cost communication problems. Among other things, you expect them to kind of be the most simple problems, right? Constant cost is very restrictive. But it also turns out that constant cost communication has many interesting connections to other questions as well, including in structural graph theory and learning theory and so on. Okay, so our goal is to understand this class of problems that has constant cost randomized communication. And what we're going to do in order to try and understand these problems is we're going to think of a way to separate out the randomness, right? So try to separate out exactly how we're going to use randomness in our protocols. And so we can say, instead of having this randomized protocol, we're going to think of a deterministic protocol, but with access to some oracle Okay, so for example, here we can think of, since equality is a problem that we can solve in constant cost communication, we can imagine, well, what problems can you solve using randomness only to solve instances of equality? And so we could imagine instead we have some oracle that computes equality, and the rest of the protocol is just deterministic. And so we say that a communication problem reduces to equality if there's a constant cost deterministic protocol that solves the problem, but where Alice and Bob have access to this oracle that computes equality. And so at any point in the protocol, Alice and Bob can supply arbitrary inputs to this oracle, and the oracle will tell them whether the inputs are equal. Or more generally, we can think of any constant cost communication problem and saying, well, what can we solve if we have a deterministic protocol with access to an oracle that computes that problem? And so if there exists some constant cost communication problem such that all other constant cost problems can be computed deterministically with access to that oracle, then we'll call that problem complete, okay? It's essentially a complete description of the way that we can use randomness to achieve constant cost communication. And so that would be the idea. Can we find some single problem that captures the entire use of randomness to get constant cost communication? And the most natural candidate, I would say, for this complete problem is the equality problem itself. So maybe it's the case that the landscape of constant cost communication looks like this. We've got randomness being used to solve equality, but then all the other problems in this landscape are just growing out of this one use of randomness. Or all of them, all these problems in constant cost communication, they all reduce to equality. And now already in previous work, it was shown that this is not the case, because there's this other problem, the one Hamming distance problem, that also has constant communication, but does not reduce to equality. One Hamming distance, Alice and Bob each have a binary string, and they want to know if the Hamming distance of their strings is just one. So previous work showed that one Hamming distance does not reduce to equality, so equality is not complete for the class of constant cost communication problems. But now here we're a little bit stuck, because although there are these other works that show these lower bounds against the equality oracle, they do not work against the one Hamming distance oracle. So these proof techniques don't work, for example, to show that two Hamming distance does not reduce to one Hamming distance, which would be the next natural step here. And so the first thing that we do in this paper is we show indeed two Hamming distance, does not reduce to one Hamming distance. And more generally, these k Hamming distance problems, for any constant k Hamming distance is a constant cost communication problem. And we show that for infinitely many constants k plus one Hamming distance does not reduce to k Hamming distance. Okay, so you can think of having an infinite hierarchy of k Hamming distance problems within the class of constant cost communication that are irreducible to the other levels. So our picture starts to look like this. But so far, this does not yet rule out the possibility that this entire k Hamming distance hierarchy rests on top of some other complete problem in the class. So maybe there's some other constant cost communication problem here, and all of the k Hamming distance problems reduce to that one complete problem. But in fact, we show that this is not the case. No matter which constant cost problem that you choose, the k Hamming distance hierarchy will at some point grow beyond it. So for every problem that you choose, there is some large enough constant k such that k Hamming distance no longer can reduce to that problem that you've chosen. And so that means that there cannot be any complete problem for the class of constant cost communication. Okay, so now how do we prove this theorem? So let's go back to our model of communication here. So what we want to do is we want to say there are these problems So whichever constant cost communication problem that I choose to be the oracle here, there's going to be some large enough k-Hamming distance problem that can be computed in constant cost with this shared randomness, but cannot be computed with access to the oracle that we've chosen. And the difficulty here is that we don't know much about the structure of constant cost communication problems in general. So we've got to try and come up with a lower bound against some constant cost communication oracle that we don't really know very much about. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, let's think about the k-Hamming distance problem here. And so we have an oracle. Let's suppose that we have an oracle communication protocol that has constant cost that computes this k-Hamming distance function here, okay? So that should output 1 if the distance between the two input strings is k. And so a protocol, an oracle protocol, it looks like this binary tree of constant size, where every node of the tree we can think of as being a query to the oracle. So here we query the oracle provides a response, and I'm using the colors orange and blue to indicate what the response of the oracle will be. Okay, so let's assume that we have an oracle protocol that computes k-Hamming distance in constant cost. And let's think about the input to this problem, two binary strings x and y, which I'm going to draw in this way. So x is the binary string across the top, and y is the binary string across the bottom. And the main step in our proof that shows this lower bound against these arbitrary oracle is to observe that, the output of this problem, it's the same no matter how you permute these dominoes. So I can take these little dominoes that represent the input and I can move them around, and it doesn't change the output of the function, but it might change the answers that the query gives throughout the protocol. Okay, so by permuting the input, I don't change the answer, but I do change the query responses. Okay, now the main step of our proof is going to say, actually, I can assume that by permuting the input, I do not change the query responses. So I can assume that all of the query responses in this constant cost protocol stay the same no matter how I permute the input. Okay, that's going to be the main step of our proof. So how do we prove this? Well, the first step is going to take our input and embed it into a much larger space. So here I'm choosing a much larger dimension, and I'm going to take my original input and I'm going to embed it in that larger dimension. So I'm going to take, all of these dominoes and stick them in this blue subset of coordinates, and I'm going to fill in all of the remaining entries with zeros. So these are all zeros. So I can think of, I take x and I put it into this blue set and fill everything else with zeros. Okay, so the new picture looks like this. And how are we going to choose this blue set? That's the trick. So if we look at one of these 0, 0 dominoes, right, where x and y are both 0, and they map somewhere, that kind of just blends in with all of this padding, with all the 0, 0 dominoes that we've used to pad the input. So we're going to ignore those, and we're just going to look at these ones that are not 0, 0. So we've got 1, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 1. And where those go to some set. Let's imagine I'm embedding into some blue set here. These dominoes go somewhere. They go to this orange set of coordinates. So I'm going to think of that orange set of coordinates. I'm going to think of coloring that set. So I've got some arbitrary set of coordinates here. I'm going to color that set. And how I'm going to color that set, I'm going to say, well, for every possible way of filling in non-0, 0 dominoes into that set, I'm going to look at this constant number of query responses that my protocol would give if I gave it this pair of inputs, this padded set of inputs. So remember, this protocol has constant cost, meaning no matter how big this new string is, the cost of the protocol stays the same, meaning the number of query responses stays the same. Okay, so for this set, I'm going to look through every possible way of filling in a non-zero domino into those positions and record what my protocol would do if I gave it that huge padded input. Okay, and this is some coloring whose size depends on the original input size, but not on this very large input size. And that means that I can apply the hypergraph-Ramsey theorem to find a blue set of coordinates such that no matter which red subset that I chose, the color is going to be the same. Okay? And what does that mean? It means that no matter how I move these 0, 0s around, so you can imagine if I move a 0, 0 back and forth here, replace it with one of these non-zero, 0 things, no matter where I move it around, the color is going to stay the same because of Ramsey's theorem. And that means that all the queries are going to stay the same. So this lets us do some limited number of permutations without changing the query responses. But the only permutations so far that we allow are the ones that move 0, 0s around. Okay, we want to be able to move anything around. So the second step is to do the same thing, but this time we'll pad with 1, 1s instead of 0, 0s. So we again embed into a much larger space, pad with 1, 1s. And by the same or the similar kind of reasoning, we'll be able to get invariance of the query responses when we move 1, 1s around. Okay, so now we can move 0, 0s around, we can move 1, 1 or 1, 1s around. It doesn't change the query responses, but we're left with these 1, 0 and 0, 1s. Okay, so far we haven't used any properties of this oracle. Okay, so that's what we're going to have to do now. So when we move 1, 0 and 0, 1 around, we can imagine swapping 2 of them. The oracle responses might change. We want to show that that doesn't happen. Well, what if the oracle response does change? What if one of the oracle responses changes when I swap these 1, 0 and this 0, 1? Okay, well, I already know that I can swap the 0, 0s around without changing the oracle response. And so I can construct this kind of sequence where I've got all 0, 0s except this 1, 0 and the 0, 1, such that when I swap the order of these two things, the query response changes, the oracle's answer changes. But it turns out that this is just equivalent to the greater than communication problem, which is very well studied, and it's very well known that the greater than communication problem does not have constant cost, right? So I don't know very much about the structure of constant cost communication problems in general, but I do know that greater than is not one of them. So if my query responses change when I swap these 1, 0, 0, 1s around, it means that my oracle must be computing greater than. And we know that can't be true. And so that means that we can swap all the dominoes around however we like without changing any of the query responses. And so that's the main step in our proof, showing that if we have a constant cost oracle protocol for any constant cost communication oracle, then the responses to the oracle queries remain the same no matter how I permute the inputs. Okay, and so that doesn't complete the proof, but that's the main step in the proof that reduces our lower bound to a much simpler problem. Now we just have to show lower bounds against these oracles that are completely permutation invariant. And so if you want to know how to complete the rest of the proof, then take a look at the paper. And so this is what the picture looks like at the end of this paper. We've got this infinite hierarchy of K-Hamming distance problems within the world of constant cost communication. And there cannot be any constant cost problem that is complete for this class, because the k-Hamming distance hierarchy will eventually grow beyond it. And so that's the end of the talk. Thank you.